Lyndon.
Good day, everyone, and I want to say a happy Air Traffic Controllers Day to all my air traffic control colleagues. My name is Amy Charles, and I happen to be the manager of air traffic services in St. Lucia. With me are my colleagues Kendell Peter to my left, who is a supervisor of air traffic control at UNORA, and to my right, it's a longtime veteran of air traffic control who now serves in the capacity of the airside operations duty manager at UNORA. So, in effect, we are celebrating the 59th anniversary of Air Traffic Controllers Day because Air Traffic Controllers Association, the International Federation of Air Traffic Controllers Association, was founded in 1961. And so 59 years later, we are here. We know our profession is one that not many people are aware of because it's pretty much a behind-the-scenes operation. And so, without further ado, we will continue, and we hope that you will enjoy the session with us for the next hour or so for us to talk about air traffic control in all its forms and also its sister organizations in terms of aeronautical information services. Also, we have aeronautical project officers. So it's a very interesting field in terms of air traffic management as a whole. I think I'll probably switch to Len, who knows so much about air traffic control, who loves air traffic control, notwithstanding the fact that he has almost like retired from our section of the service, and he's now doing the airside management of the planes. Your memories of air traffic control, Len?
Morning again, everyone, and thank you, Amy. Yes, indeed, I have quite a few memories of air traffic control, and the years that I served as an active air traffic controller was indeed one that I did with pride, and it's a job that requires a great amount of responsibility on each individual, but what's more important is that each individual has to work with another individual, making us one team. So in sort of a team setting, if you have a weak link, then naturally it affects the team. And in terms of memories, I suppose as we go along, I can share a few here and there, but I have had a few, not a few, I would say quite a number of good memories, both with regional pilots and international pilots. And sometimes it allows us to recognize that we are all individuals, except that we are in different professions. So some persons may believe, that probably the pilot is the more important person in the aviation scheme of things where pilot controller is concerned, but actually the controller is equally even more important because whilst the pilot is responsible for his single aircraft, the controller is responsible for his aircraft and also the other aircraft that are in the airspace or on the ground at any given time. So hence for me, you cannot underestimate the importance and the responsibility of an air traffic controller as it is in this profession. But like I say, as we go along, I mean, when the bits come up, I can, let you know some of the things that have happened over the years with us as air traffic controllers. Yes.
Okay, so Kendell, to you, you're not only a supervisor of air traffic control at UNORA, you also happen to be the president of the Air Traffic Controllers Association. So give us your take on what air traffic control means to you and just about the business of air traffic control.
Well, certainly I know in this time that while we are always sort of in the background, maybe the public does not necessarily know much about our jobs and what we do. I think it's important as an air traffic controller and as the president of the St. Lucia Air Traffic Controllers Association, who is sort of charged with promoting awareness of what we do, that I say that we are professionals. It is the theme for this year. We are professionals. We've always been professionals. Certainly in this pandemic, we have been here to support all the repatriation flights, all the cargo flights, all the medical flights that have come into St. Lucia. And I want to ensure the public that the way we work as controllers, professionalism is definitely one of the hallmarks of the profession. Everything we do is guided by international standards and recommended practices that come all the way down from the International Civil Aviation Authority down through ECA and our own local Ministry of Civil Aviation, and of course LASPA as the navigation provider. We make sure that all of our procedures and resources are to that level to ensure that safety is not compromised. So I think it's important on this day as any to say that.
Absolutely. In terms of my own history, I became an air traffic controller. It would be 1986. You don't be. I finished air traffic control school in 1985. However, you don't become an air traffic controller until you have actually succeeded your on-the-job validation, and in terms of your training as with a senior controller on the job. So I would say I would date myself back to, I remember April 1st, All Fool's Day of 1986, but it has not been a fool's job at all. I totally and thoroughly enjoyed this job, and to Kendall's point, the professionalism that was required, the autonomy, and at the same time, you have to have the teamwork. You could be independent, but you must also work within a team and support the team from a point of view of two airports, because you work at UNRWA, you work at George Charles, and we have to work together and trust each other, because George Charles is not seeing what's happening at UNRWA, but they have to trust the air traffic controller from UNRWA, and vice versa, because UNRWA, in the case of St. Lucia, happens to be the parent station. And we talk about two different types of air traffic control, which is approach control, and that is aircraft approaching the facility for both airports, which UNRWA takes care of, and then you deal with aerodrome control, which both UNRWA and George Charles do. So the airspace for George Charles would be lower airspace, but UNRWA goes higher and is the daddy, so to speak, of air traffic control in St. Lucia. So it has been I am no longer an active air traffic controller. I am more into the administration of air traffic control, but it still remains very, very dear to my heart, and my colleagues remain dear to my heart, and we still every day, because air traffic control is about every day that something can change. So this job is non-stop, especially even for the persons in management, because it's like 24/7, because you never know when you get that call. Somebody needs something special, somebody needs some attention, an extra flight that needs to happen, somebody needs to be evacuated because of a medical condition, and it's always on the go, and you must always be ready. And so air traffic controllers have to be also fit in terms of mental fitness as well as physical fitness. As a matter of fact, we are in the process of carrying out our medicals, and that medical has to be carried out by a licensed aviation specialist who is going to be brought in from Antigua, because we don't have one on island. It is that significant. It's the same medical license that the pilots do. So this is a significant job, and the persons in that job deserve the respect, and pretty much, I suppose, good no news is good news. So people don't hear anything, so that means things are going well. But you don't want to hear bad news in air traffic control at all. Yes. I don't know if anybody in our audience would like to ask any questions, so we would be very willing to answer. Otherwise, we'll just continue the conversation.
One of the main questions is, what does it take to become an air traffic controller?
Okay, the question is, what does it take to become an air traffic controller? Len, I will pass that on to you.
All right, so I think in the first instance, I mean, from an academic standpoint, you obviously need to have maths, English, geography, and some science subjects. But that is, I mean, the baseline to get into to be able to start the profession. But even beyond that now, once you have successfully gotten into the profession, it requires a great amount of discipline, a sense of responsibility, because the job that you do, you literally have the lives and the livelihoods of persons in your hands. It is a job that requires you to be a quick planner, a quick decision maker. So in other words, it's not one of those jobs where you can say, okay, I'm looking for a job. You have to be passionate about what you're about to do, because otherwise you would quickly realize that the stresses that comes along with air traffic control, and I kid you not, there are stresses at times, because you could have a shift of 6 hours and the first 2 hours are pretty light and the next 4 hours are extremely heavy. So you have to prepare yourself mentally to be able to deal with that kind of pressure. So if you know from the onset that's not the challenge that you want to give yourself, I would gladly suggest to you, do not enter the field of air traffic control. Not that I'm trying to discourage persons, but all I'm saying, it is a job, especially in those modern days that we live in. And ever so often the technology is changing, there are new things that we have to learn, and as such you have to remain also current with whatever rating that you have within air traffic control. Because every air traffic controller, before you actually become a traffic controller, need to go to a school, a specialized school. In the first world countries like the United States and Europe, it takes as much as maybe 2.5 to 3 years to get properly qualified. In the Caribbean, it's somewhere anywhere between 8 months to a year, give and take. But when you get back into your country, you still have to go through a process of validation and proficiency checks to be able to work within your local environment.
Okay.
I think one of the interesting things about the job is that it's a job that you're always growing to. When you come out of school as a cadet, as we say, you're not a controller.
No.
And a year later, you'll be a better controller. A year later from that, you'll be a better controller. It's something that experience always makes you a better controller, as long as you... Because no 2 days in ATC are the same, as we always say.
Yeah.
And it's a very dynamic profession, and you always sort of build your capacity as a problem solver, as a communicator, as a team player. So yeah, it's an interesting field to pursue.
And I must say, there is the aspect of customer service. Whilst it may appear to be robust and you in the tower, but I can tell you there is a customer service component to it, because at the end of the day, the pilot, who is your client, so to speak, needs to know that he can feel confident in knowing that the person who's dispensing the instructions to him is not doing it in a dogmatic way, but in a way that there's empathy depending on the situation. But in the same manner, you must remain in control as the air traffic controller. And I remember when the whole thing of customer service in SLASPA was coming into play. I remember an incident that happened, not an incident actually, a situation that happened to me somewhere back in the early 90s. I was working in the tower. We normally every year around the latter part of the year, you find that persons from Europe or anywhere, they would just rent, say a group of maybe 18 people would rent 9 aircraft and they would fly information. So there on that evening we had, I think it was about 6 aircraft going from Beef Island to St. Vincent. And interesting enough, 2 of the aircraft had gotten into St. Vincent and the sun was just about to set. St. Vincent at the time, well, the old airport, not Argyle, but E.T. Joshua, you needed a night rating to go into there. So there are those other 4 aircraft in the Caribbean Sea, and they're not too sure what they're supposed to do. We quickly just stepped in, guided all of them in. Unknown to me, a month and a half later, a fax is coming from the general manager of SLASPA, who then was Harold Wilson. A fax was sent to by the pilots indicating how much they appreciated what we did for them that day, because St. Lucia was not part of their plan and they had the best time in St. Lucia for that one nighter. We got them into hotels. We were able to just go into, I think at the time it was Club Med. We checked them in, we helped them out. They had no paperwork. We went to speak to customs, immigration. And at that point, as far as I'm aware, customer service was not even something people were talking about back then. But when I think of it now, we actually did that, So it's one of those things that, that comes with the job.
Yes. Also on point for both of you, because what I'd like to add is that the flexibility that you need to have and the ability to multitask, because of the fact that you need to be a person that can remain focused even when things are quiet, because it's easy to lose focus and get bored as a human being when not too much is happening. And as a matter of fact, you'd figure typically in terms of the research, things happen in terms of incidents with air traffic control or in aviation when things are quiet generally. So it is extremely important to be a person who is flexible, who knows how to adjust to situations and to know when it's down, I need to keep my focus regardless, because I could have an incident with 1 plane or 2 planes for that matter. And then when the traffic builds up, that I could adjust and raise my level to handle a whole set of traffic over a couple of hour period, then relax again, but always be in focus every single time. So do we have another question?
What does the future of air traffic control look like for St. Lucia and Hawaii?
Okay, I will start with that answer in the sense that I think literally, I suppose it goes down, the sky is the limit, in a sense. Air traffic control is going to evolve, and it's going to become more automated, and it's going to, but I don't think the human element will ever be taken away from air traffic control, no matter how, just like flying a plane. I think people at the end of the day will always want to know the comfort of a human that is behind all the technology. But it's going to expand in terms of, we already seen, and some of that technology will be coming to St. Lucia very soon with a couple of projects that SLASPA is working on in terms of enhancing safety, in terms of enhancing efficiency and expedition. So you're going to have more and more tools in terms of what you could see that because you can see the aircraft, because a lot of what we do right now is procedural, with some assistance of watching a radar screen, but not necessarily carrying out a radar function. So what you would need to do now, once you have that kind of facilitation in terms of technology, you can bring aircraft closer together and manage them more efficiently. So in terms of saving time, which of course saves money for operators and just makes everybody else in terms of the business aspect, because the airport, is the window to the world. And also it is the gateway through which all business, that includes seaports as well, and SLASPA is both, but this is where tourism, and when you talk about e-trade right now, this is it. So this is where we're going to be. I think air cargo is going to get bigger and bigger, and I think we have to prepare and plan for that. And but generally technology is going to expand, and the controller is just going to have information at their fingertips, just like the pilot in the cockpit. I don't know if you guys have any more to add.
I could,
Yeah.
As an active controller in the tower, I think one of the things that I'm sort of looking at going forward is the proliferation of, I would say, unmanned aerial vehicles,
Very good point.
or
Very good
drones,
point.
and how they are going to coexist with the traffic, manned traffic. And interestingly, I based on the way things have gone in the world, we know that it is unavoidable that these drones will have to coexist in a space with the traffic that we now control. And I know for now, St. Lucia, the Ministry of Civil Aviation has put out some guidelines for drone operators. I don't know that it's being followed necessarily by all drone operators on the island, but it is something we have to look for going into the future. I was privy to a panel sometime last week, the World ATM Congress, and interestingly, the FAA, their position was that they wanted to take no action, either from the standpoint of a regulator or that of a air navigation service provider, that would sort of stifle innovation in that field. So that means it's going to pose a challenge for us as an air navigation service provider to respond to the rate at which the technology is moving. And I know there are places where drones are used to go places where it's not safe for humans to go. So reasonably, I think that's one of the things we have to look at going forward.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Very good point, Kendell.
The other aspect too as well, in terms of development and technology, there's also going to be a sort of a shift in that you may find areas where even control cabs may not necessarily be at an airport.
Very true.
So for example, you can have all the controllers down at Hiranora controlling aircraft that are landing at George Charles. And that technology exists already, and it's on trial now in certain places in Europe. And I was privy to seeing a simulator in Europe, in Hungary, and I can tell you it is fascinating, because there are angles that even the human eye can't pick up, and more so, there are the infrared cameras that can pick up what's happening inside of the aircraft even when it has landed in the control tower. So it was funny because I remember being there, and an aircraft had landed from, I think it was from Dubai. It was an Emirates aircraft, and then we looked up. There were three areas that were hot on the aircraft: the nose wheel where the brakes were, and the cockpit where the two pilots were. So we sort of had a laugh about it, because it actually can tell you everything that's going on, and these are the kind of things that we have to expect going forward. So, and people have to be able to trust as well, because I know the same way. I mean, nobody wants to sort of have an unmanned aircraft in the sky with passengers. We hope it doesn't get to that. But in the same token, from a standpoint of controllers controlling from a remote area, because we actually do it right now in the sense that we control aircraft that we don't see.
Absolutely.
But now aircraft actually being able to land at an airport where the controller is not at the same exact
Physically.
airport. These are things that we're going to see. Yeah.
I think
Absolutely.
in order to sort of ensure that the public has confidence in the
Yeah.
systems, I think it's important to say that everything we do in air traffic control, there's always a redundancy.
Yes, for
There's
sure.
Always
Exactly.
there's always a safe waste measure. So any technology that comes about and it will be implemented as we expect that it will, safety is always a priority.
Of course.
Safety is always a priority.
I like that word, safety, and in terms of, because I even want to touch on the fact that I don't think that I'm sure there are persons in the general public who are wondering, okay, in the light of COVID, how are you guys managing in terms of the air traffic control? And because I suppose your planes are landing, people are coming into the country, and people are leaving the country, as the case may be. And I just want to assure the general public that the controllers, we took a collective, we sat down when COVID first happened in March, and of course also using technology in terms of discussion, because Zoom is the in thing now, and the other Teams and whatever you may use. But what we did was we had to come up with a situation in terms of a contingency, because there are only 26 air traffic controllers in St. Lucia. We have 5 others who are trained, so we'll have a team of 31. But those persons had to be protected as well in terms of for the country, for aviation to flow and to continue efficiently and safely into the country. So what we have done, and we have continued, because we never let up, because we knew that COVID was going to be with us for quite a while. So we have since end of March, we have created at both airports 2 teams of controllers who end up working shifts who never see each other. So they are broken. They work with the same persons in terms of each team that they work with all the time. And then of course there's a standby team in the event that something goes wrong with one shift. But the teams do not see each other, because we want a situation where if something was to happen, God forbid, to one of our team members, that the whole team is not affected. So we have a fail-safe, to Kendall's point, redundancy always that we keep. So we have an A team and a B team at both airports, and we had to structure even the times of operation of the airport to suit the functionality of that operation. And we will continue working this way as long as it's possible to do so, as we always operate under the guidance of the Ministry of Health and the Chief Medical Officer. But that is very important for the public to know, that we have gone out of our way to ensure that we protect the continued business of aviation in St. Lucia, that we have protected our air traffic controllers teams as far as possible.
Yeah, I have colleagues who I have not seen since March, so I can speak to that.
Yeah, yes, and it's something we had to do. So if we communicate, we have to communicate via Zoom, via FaceTime, WhatsApp, over the phone. But it is what it is. We are in a new normal, and it is going to last for a while. Yes. Are there any other questions from the public?
What has been the most memorable experience in all of your stints as air traffic controllers? Most memorable.
Most memorable. Most memorable stint I had. It was not necessarily a positive, but it was a memorable experience in terms of everything we have spoken about. Keeping your cool under pressure. And it was an incident I had way back, I think it was maybe about 1996. I remember it like it is yesterday, and I'm sure my colleagues could tell you those moments you never forget. And it was a particular big cargo aircraft which used to operate into George Charles. And unfortunately, there was a small French aircraft, recreational aircraft, so to speak, private pilot who was supposed to be on his way to Viewfort, Leonora. So we weren't aware that he was operating, and he made the error of coming into George Charles. So I remember it where looking up, and that is so important for air traffic control. Air traffic control, you have to keep your eyes and ears. Notwithstanding that you're talking to the planes, you must always have almost like a 360 visual of your airspace. And I remember looking up and seeing the cargo plane, the big aircraft, and I'm seeing a plane below him. And there was another private plane coming in, which I was speaking to. That plane was actually coming to St. Lucia. So I spoke to that plane. I said, what are you doing in front of this plane? And he said, no, I'm not. It's not me. And then I realized, I looked across towards the College Hill. I saw the smaller plane. And I'm seeing this one. And then now I am not in communication with this aircraft. And I have to inform the aircraft. First of all, the big plane cannot simply just pull up, because if he pulls up, the thrust will knock off the small plane which is below him. So I had to inform him. As a matter of fact, I was working with a colleague. I happened to be the supervisor. So I took the microphone from the colleague and started working the traffic because I would be accountable anyhow. And in terms of the experience, I had more experience. So the plane came down, kind of bumped on the ground, and the pilots in the big plane, they were former military guys, so they unflustered, and they're telling me, tell me when he stopped, because they want to know what he's doing. And this guy, eventually, I'm trying to get him on the frequency. I tried all different frequencies, but he was afraid, so he was not answering. But he was hearing me, and then he kept bumping up and down the runway, and then I had to wait until I felt that he had actually settled, and then I told the other aircraft, okay, you can pull up now. And I remember the other aircraft pulling up. It's an incident, and the other aircraft pulling up and passing right in front of, I was at George Charles, in front of the control tower. I could see the boxes of cargo. I could see the pilots. I could see one of the pilots had a red tie. I remember, it was so vivid. And the aircraft pulled up, went across, and the other guy eventually, we found out that he was totally lost. He was totally flustered and everything else. But it was the closest I'd ever come to a major incident. And I remember it being a surreal experience that I was working the control traffic. I was thinking at the same time about potentially the investigation, what would happen, but just going through it. And it is an unbelievable experience, but you have to remain calm. And I remember the aircraft, the big aircraft that landed, I don't want to say the name, and then the pilots came across and they said, hey, good job. So I said, what's up? You know what I mean? And he said, that's no big deal. No big deal. No big deal. In the military, we do that all the time. And my heart is in my foot. That was my experience. Yeah.
Okay, so for me, one of the experiences I could remember was, it wasn't quite as traumatic as yours, but I would say the first time JetBlue came to St. Lucia, I recall at the time at Leonora we had what we call the NDB approaches and the VR approaches. And JetBlue came in and he wanted to fly the RNAV or GPS approach, which we did not have at the time. So that experience sort of, I remember the pilot came up to the tower and he explained why he wanted to do the GPS approach. That experience sort of got me to a point where I understood more about aviation. So I was wondering, why did this guy not carry the equipment to fly the NDB approach? But I understood that JetBlue's model as a low-cost carrier was to keep the aircraft as light as possible. So they wanted the GPS approach. That also led to development of ATC in St. Lucia, because eventually we did get a GPS approach at Leonora and subsequently at George Charles. And now I could say most of the aircraft that actually come into St. Lucia do fly a GPS approach, which is I guess more cost effective for them. It lets them land a lot quicker and burn less fuel and reduces holding times and that kind of stuff. So JetBlue's first or maiden voyage into St. Lucia was one of the catalysts to me understanding more about aviation beyond just air traffic control, but more about the industry as a whole.
Yeah, and not necessarily to put in a plug for JetBlue, but they actually were they worked with SLASPA in terms of the development of those approaches, because if you have an aircraft that's going to be operating daily into St. Lucia, and that's all they had in the aircraft. In fact, most of the time they would fly and reach overhead what we call our navigational facility at the airport, and then look out for the field. And the hope was that you would have a visual reference to the field to conduct the landing, because if there was no visual reference, they had nothing else to do. So pretty much they eventually had to sort of expedite that development of our nav approaches for St. Lucia. I mean, here in Aurora being the first one. I've had a number of experiences, but I remember having one with a pilot, and it was sort of a pilot error, and it was a carrier. One afternoon we were working, and this guy's coming along the west coast, and normally the west coast is very scenic, so most pilots, once the weather is nice, they want an opportunity to be able to get down to a low altitude, look at the pitons and things of that sort. So one pilot called in and he says, okay, St. Lucia approach, aircraft so we at X level requesting, will be requesting a visual approach. So I said to him, okay, descend to a certain altitude and call when you are ready for the visual approach. So a few minutes passed and I'm not hearing from the pilot. I was working with a colleague of mine. I said to him, I guarantee you he has busted the level already, which means he has gone below the level that I assigned him. So I just calmly said, aircraft so-and-so, report your level and position. And there was a 30-second silence. Yeah. So at that point, they must be now communicating speaking to the two of them in the cockpit. And he sort of said, and then, he came across to say he was at 2,500 feet, just south of the pitons. Said, just continue, report and final. When the aircraft landed, I told my colleague, okay, I bet you he's going to be in the tower within 2 minutes. So said, so done. The guy comes up to the tower, very senior pilot, flying for in excess of 30 years at the time. He says to me, he just looked at me, shook his head, he says, you got me. This is the first time this ever happened to me in 30 years. It was a miscommunication between myself and my colleague, and I am so appreciative of the way you handle it. And the thing is, there was no reason for me to shout at him on the frequency, because there was no other aircraft in his area. But what he did was sort of a violation, because he went through a level that he would not have. But what you think is that the guy had fallen in love with the Roman Catholic Church in Soisel, which is right on the west coast. And for him, every opportunity he had, whenever he was coming into St. Lucia, whether it's once a month, he wanted to be at an altitude where he could slow down that aircraft and allow the passengers to enjoy it. And since that time, he and I remain friends. Whenever he comes to St. Lucia, he comes up to see me. And I mean, this is the kind of camaraderie that we have between pilot and controller. Of course, when it's not antagonistic. Yeah.
True.
I should probably take the opportunity to say that I know a lot of people look at air traffic control as a stepping stone to becoming a pilot, but air traffic management is a career on its own, and the best pilots I know were all former air traffic controllers. So I think being an air traffic controller builds your capacity to be a pilot.
So, certainly.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And I want to shout out the air traffic controllers in St. Lucia. It has come back to my mind again, because I want to shout out to them, because we are essential service. Maybe a lot of people don't know that we actually, by law, determined to be an essential service. I'm not taking away anything from, of course, the police and the medical team and the fire service and the remarkable work they are doing right now. But I want to recognize the air traffic controllers team and a lot of also other staff at SLASPA, both at seaports and at airports, who are out there working and doing what they're doing, and may not be getting the recognition that I know some of us believe that we deserve, but continue plodding along. As a matter of fact, like I said earlier, the no news is good news. And so just keep on plodding along or whatever, and to know that you are well thought of. And the team, I know from the general manager all the way down, thinks highly of you. And I think other persons out there appreciate it as well. But I just want to let the general public know that these are a team of persons who are out there functioning on all kinds of circumstances, all the stresses that we are going through, as well as a country in this pandemic. And they are essential, and they are doing well.
So what is the St. Lucia Air Traffic Control Association? know what exactly that group is and how much does it depend on IFACA?
Okay, so the question is, and Kendell, of course, I'm going to go to you on that one. Persons want to know, what is the St. Lucia Air Traffic Controllers Association all about? What does that mean?
Well, the St. Lucia Traffic Controllers Association, or SLACA, it's a professional body that is committed to promoting professionalism. I think our tagline is professionalism, participation, and progress. So we are committed to promoting that in the profession. So we are made up of air traffic controllers, former air traffic controllers, as well as we call our AIS officers and the aeronautical projects officers. Formed in 1985, so we've been around for a while. We were we were the first association in the Americas region.
Yeah, there was the Americas conference.
So yeah, we've been around for a while, and I know we've been in the background, but our main goal is to promote professionalism in the field of air traffic control, and we're all generally employees of SLASPA. So our sort of engagement with the air navigation service provider happens at the level of employee-employer. So there may not necessarily be a need for us to be out in the public, but certainly that is something we can look at going down the road. So to promote the profession.
Yes, the Air Traffic Controllers Association has done some great things over the years. Again, air traffic controllers tend to be behind the scenes kind of person, so we are not out there. But also they have done a lot of charitable works in terms of support in the community, as well as even when our sister islands have issues with hurricanes, the damage there or whatever, and we have risen to that occasion. So I know we don't toot our horn, we remain in the background, but this is also part of in terms of the charitable aspects for air traffic controllers.
Yeah, and to Kendell's point, being part of an international organization, you get the opportunity to interact and network with a number of associations around the world, be it in the Americas region, the Asia Pacific, the African region, the European region, because we all have a story to tell and a story to share. And sometimes it is amazing sometimes that you go into a conference wherever and you're having a discussion with a colleague, and then it just so happened that they're looking for a solution to a problem, and we have the solution because we have experienced it, and likewise we have a problem and need a solution. So it's a sort of a fraternity, so to speak, of colleagues who get together and meet, be it in a region on one hand, and then you meet internationally. So at any given point in time, you could find yourself traveling all the way to Hong Kong or to Sydney in Australia to attend an international conference.
Unfortunately, not this year. But
Yeah. Zoom.
Yeah. And I must say, over the years, I have been fortunate to be on the executive and to have traveled to a number of conferences. And sometimes it's even one where you don't even mind. I think the trip to Hong Kong, I sort of sponsored it myself because it's very far to go. But I figured it's an opportunity to see a country, but as well to represent St. Lucia. And I can tell you, normally these conferences, you need to have at least 3 persons, because there are 3 committees, an administrative, a technical, and a professional committee. And you must have a representative at each of those committees. But unfortunately, because it was so far to travel, I was the only one, so I was pretty much like on steroids, moving from one committee meeting to the next, trying to make sure I pick up as much information to get back. And I remember this one afternoon, a Thursday afternoon, we were on a break. And I stood there at 2 o'clock in the afternoon because of all the travel and the time changes. And I literally just was falling asleep. I mean, I was just falling forward, and I just told him, no, okay, I need to go. And I went in, I had like a 5-hour, that maybe was one of the deepest naps I've ever had in my life. I got rejuvenated, and then I was ready to go, because these conferences are like 1 week long. So you in meetings for the entire day, and in the evening there's a lot of activity to take place. So
Yes.
it's an experience, certainly.
So do we have any other questions?
Okay. How has COVID impacted on your role as air traffic controllers?
Okay, I think in terms of, I think I spoke to some of that earlier, in terms of the fact that we had to actually do a division of our workload in terms of the teams of air traffic control. For a while, it was a situation where traffic-wise, we were only dealing with cargo and medical and authorized operations. Then we, I think effective from July 9th, we started dealing with, St. Lucia opened officially, and of course the other carriers started coming in. So pretty much I think the air traffic controller remains a constant, because pretty much that is what they do, air traffic control. And as now I would say, because of the health facility, which every island is and every country pretty much must have, you have a situation now that where you have to manage limited parking space and limited slots, and also many people having the addition now of having a medical process at the airport. So I think going forward it is going to be very interesting, and it will simply be not simply air traffic control, but a lot of air traffic management, because you would have to assess to see whether you park whom at what time, so that, because you have to get past, it'll have to be not simply about running controlling aircraft, but controlling things on the ground in terms of passenger movement on the ground, that you don't have overlap, that you don't have conflicting movements of passengers, especially not simply because it is illegal by the International Civil Aviation Organization. You must not have contamination of passengers in terms of crossing each other or communicating with each other, but also from a health point of view now, in terms of COVID. So we're talking about safety, we're talking about health, and so air traffic control is going to get very interesting over the next few months as the traffic continues to build up, and we see it coming. And so it's going to be the new normal, but we have to be on our toes, and it's a situation where we may have to start managing, we've done it in the past, but actually manage traffic from even the day before, and plan for your traffic day ahead, and plan for contingencies of, suppose this one would have had that time and they came in a little bit later, and who you bring in ahead. It is going to be very interesting, but in terms of the work, it remains air traffic control, and the teams are going to continue as long as we can in terms of keeping them separate, because God forbid, like as I said, that we cannot have potentially a situation where if a controller is infected and then you pass it on to the rest, you need, because that means your aviation in St. Lucia, there are no air traffic controllers. So, and people will have to go in quarantine and everything like that. So we are trying our best to keep a situation for St. Lucia where we continue the team approach until such time as the Ministry of Health says, you know what, there's a vaccine, we are over this hump. And so we're going to do our best to do that and to provide the best and safest and most efficient service that we can provide.
How has it been historically in your role as an air traffic controller, especially as a woman and just developing in the field? How has it changed being a woman at air traffic controller then and being in this management position right now?
Oh, yeah, that's a very good question. When I came into air traffic control, but I started off in the AIS office, which is the Aeronautical Information Office, but we do the flight planning and everything else. And I remember shout out to Miss Colindia Murray, who happened to be the first female air traffic controller, I think, as a matter of fact, in the region. And that she became an air traffic controller in 1972. And I remember seeing Miss Murray in the control tower, because initially when I first came in, I met the guys, and I felt that the job was a bit intimidated when I used to go up and visit. And then one day, I think she was at UNRWA, she had been sent back down from UNRWA back to her original base, George Charles. I saw her in the control tower and I said, wow, a woman can do this, And so she was my biggest inspiration. I think there was another female controller, Beverly, at UNRWA at the time, but Colindia was the one that I knew. And I said, I think I even said something to her, and then she told me, yes, you can do it, And from then on, I pursued it, went off to school to do air traffic control, and it became my passion. I loved air traffic control. As a matter of fact, from the way I saw it, I could have remained an air traffic controller just in the control tower for the rest of my life. I love that job that much. And so I had I was not thinking I'm becoming the administrative manager of air traffic control. I was not. But typically, that has been my lifespan. I end up doing stuff because it's there, and I do it whether I'm afraid to do it or not. So I believe in face your fears, so to speak. I know that I was afraid of doing the job, but it was that I was not necessarily focused on doing that. I was a union rep. I was all these things all the time accidentally, and then eventually I came in. I think to do a stint downtown at Slasper, and afterwards I said, this is not too bad. Although I missed the control tower, I didn't miss it, but then I found another way in terms of all the stuff I used to say when I was in the union and representing staff and all the things I believed in, that hadn't changed. And so now it was an opportunity as far as practical to make it better and to expand the team and to know that persons had to move up and persons had to be recognized. And because you know the hard work that goes into it, because I was in it. So that has been my focus in terms of broadening air traffic control and broadening the scope for air traffic controllers, encouraging air traffic controllers to evolve into more stuff than they are doing right now. Like Kendell is a classic example of a person who has done a lot of stuff in terms of his degrees in aviation and everything else, and also to build the future, because this is about a legacy and not staying there and saying I'm holding on to this. I want to see persons come up with me. But the administration of air traffic control has been interesting, sometimes frustrating, but a wonderful, wonderful experience, which I will not ever say that it was just my life path seems to have just been blessed. And I am one of those persons that found a field that I actually absolutely love.
So how is SLASPA celebrating our air traffic controllers this year?
Okay. As a matter of fact, I thought it was going to be a low-key year because of COVID and everything else. But I have to say thanks so much to the business development and corporate communications team of SLASPA, who approached us last month and said, hey, I suppose we were on the calendar for sure. And then, of course, they approached us in terms of having air traffic controllers involved. And I know air traffic controllers gave testimonials of what their individual experiences were like. We are doing this today. We also made some lovely cupcakes with planes on them for the air traffic controllers in terms of for that day today. And we have messages from the general manager, from different persons, and just wishing controllers the best. It is still low-key in a sense, and understanding the situation that we're in, but the fact is, I mean, it is more than I imagined, to tell the truth, how 2020 was going. So I'm really appreciative to the Business Development Department of SLASPA. You have another question? Yes. If we don't have any other questions, let me maybe going through some final thoughts.
Well, certainly, I mean, the journey within aviation for me has been, it has been good to me, I must admit. I have been blessed, like you say, with the opportunities to be able to dabble into various fields. I am currently now doing sort of airside operations management, but I'm very much working on a daily basis with the air traffic control team, and I still consider myself an air traffic controller. I do miss it, I must admit, I do miss it, but sometimes you sort of have to move on to allow growth within an organization and stuff like that. I mean, another thing that I can speak of that, it just came to my mind. Last year I was fortunate to be in Europe, and I actually was at a university in Europe lecturing or giving I could say lecturing student pilots from Europe and Africa, because apparently that university within that country has a flight school set up, and they could not have found anybody to do the work. A colleague of mine reached out to me and said, would you be interested? And so there is, this thing can take you to places that you never know. we also find air traffic controllers. We work alongside the fire services in St. Lucia. We do lectures with them all the time in terms of airport familiarization, aircraft familiarization. These are things we do. So you as an individual just have to recognize how much scope there is, and depending on what your future thoughts are, or your plans are, then you can, move around and do whatever it is that you want to do. But there's so much in aviation that you can do, and we have all had opportunities to do various programs, not necessarily air traffic control per se, but various other aviation programs, and I've been fortunate to do that, and I think I'm pretty much a well-rounded individual. I've had the opportunity to serve on the Air Transport Licensing Board in St. Lucia. So these are things that make you have different perspectives in terms of what aviation is all about in a country. And I'm just happy to have been invited today to be able to share my thoughts with my colleagues. And, I like I always say, I'm always willing and open to be able to share my experiences, because back in the day when we worked, we had a lot less controllers on duty, so to speak, per shift, and some of the tools that we now have at our disposal in modern day, we did not have it back then. It was challenging, but it was exciting, and just to add, I remember I have one more story. I remember one evening we were working, and then there was this controller from London Heathrow. He came in he was leaving on a British Airways flight, so he came up to the tower, and in those days we had Liat 354 going up into Antigua, we had Caledonian, British Airways. I think at the time we had about 6 aircraft working, and he stood in the background. It took us relatively about 5 minutes, because in those days we never had GPS approaches, so everybody had to come over the airport.
Right.
So we got through it within 5 minutes. Then we turned back, we looked at him, and he said, no, I can't do this. Because in those bigger countries, whilst they have a lot more traffic, they have a lot more processes. So aircraft already has a set profile to go into an airport without any issues whatsoever. So aircraft can come and go and not conflict.
And sector control.
Yeah. But with us, we did not have those things. So we had to rely on our procedural training. And it just goes to show you that you might think that you're in George Charles or Eleonora, and that somebody might say, but these guys are not busy. But every single airport has its own challenges. Never underestimate, because you may have a George Charles Airport, but they may have things about it that makes it very difficult to operate in and out of because of its proximity to Eleonora. So that I'm saying all of this to say that, these are some of the experiences that you have, and you can safely say as an air traffic controller, you're good. Yeah.
Kendell?
I just want to say, as I have indicated before, that we are indeed professionals, and as both Len and Amy have indicated, the job really builds your capacity. It builds your ability to be a better problem solver. It makes you more creative to solve, unexpected situations. And so that is how both Amy and Len could have easily risen to the position that they are now. And I also want to take a moment to say to the members of Slacker on this day that the executive of Slacker, we're proud of you. Keep doing the good work that you're doing. We know it's been challenging, especially in these times, but we know our value as air traffic controllers, and we will celebrate you as soon as we can. But unfortunately, we cannot be together because we want to preserve the integrity of the team structure to ensure that the country doesn't have to get shut down. So, I just want to say, enjoy your day.
Yes, and we are with you in spirit, and we thank you once again. I want to say something also about air traffic controllers. We've said all the beautiful things, but also what I've noticed, consistency of air traffic controllers. We tend to become very impatient people because you see, decisions are made instantly. So sometimes when you transition, and that was an issue for me sometimes, when you transition into administration or whatever, you figure instant, but why are they taking so long? Make a decision,
Yeah.
So you tend to, and you have to watch that in yourself, to not be impatient with your family, impatient with others, because you're so accustomed to making decisions right away. So you don't understand the concept of waiting for things to happen. So all in all, we really appreciate the opportunity that we had today to share with you, the general public, and also our colleagues and other persons who are aviation enthusiasts, we believe, out there. We thank the air traffic controllers once again, and we also thank, just from the airport community section, that all the persons, I spoke about SLASPA as an organization through this crisis, but there are many other persons on the airport, even on this controller day, that I want to say a special shout out to, and I'm talking about the security screeners, the customs and excise department. You're talking about the janitors at the airport, the airline employees. We're talking about immigration, all these departments that are there behind the scenes working and operating those airports, and having things come through safely and taking care of the passengers. And our Port Health Department, which has become a critical department to us at the airports, and of course our fire service, who's also behind the scenes, the fire service department. We all form the airport and make it happen. Thank you, and happy Controllers Day to all.